Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Um, I can see that the slides are up, so maybe I'll just um, start talking and maybe I can say when they need to be changed. Is that right? Fabulous. Okay. Well, thank you so much to Renate and Francisca for having me here today. Truly my honor. Um, for the next 15 minutes, I'm going to try and offer a series of provocations bundled under the title Seeing Slant, Walking as a Relational Practice. And I'll just say when the next slide has to go on. Um, one, in December 1958, the Algerian situationist Abdelhafid Khatib attempted a psychogeographic walk in Les Halles, the central food market in Paris. On his nightly walks around the market, he observed formal and informal boundaries of the area, the thoroughfares, the lines of ambience as ever-changing across day and night, the bourgeois residential regions, the, quote, logjam of lorries, the barricades of fruit and vegetable panniers, the movement of workers with their mechanical or hand barrows that prevents access to cars and almost constantly obliges the pedestrian to alter his route. Khatib, end quote. Khatib calls for the conversion of Les Halles into a theme park for the ludic education of workers. However, Khatib's experiment remained incomplete. The situationists added a note at the end of the essay, noting Khatib was, quote, subject to police harassment in light of the fact that since September of 1958, North Africans have been banned from the streets after 9:30 in the evening. And of course, the bulk of Abdelhafid Khatib's work concerned the owl at night. After being arrested twice and spending 2 nights in a holding cell, he relinquished his efforts, end quote, to walk. And so his experiment remained incomplete. When I visited Les Halles in 2016 on my Indian passport and Schengen tourist visa that required me to relinquish 3 months of bank statements, provide evidence from my UK university that I would return to complete my studies, as well as proof of savings amidst 30 pages of other documentation for a 3-day trip. The area looked very different and yet the same. I could see two cities merging. The city that stopped Khatib from conducting his nightly walks, and the city that surveilled my entrance as a migrant to conduct my own walks. I was not a situationist, merely a PhD student studying them, and yet I felt closer in affinity and pedagogy to Khatib's barriers and failures. I, too, could not merely walk anywhere. But we were also different. Khatib's masculine Algerian identity was othered differently to my brown, feminized body. But I was and still am embodying of my dominant caste or Savarna identity, still more free than migrant workers who are often precarious and restricted across caste, race, and statehood. While there was no curfew, the processes of racialization I was subject to across Europe and the UK meant I found myself in ghostly proximity, pedagogic proximity even, to Khatib's own footsteps, his starts and stops, his detours and meanderings. I was in relation with him and in relation with those walking around me. Relation is the knowledge in motion of beings, which risks the being of the world, wrote the Martinique philosopher, poet, and novelist Edouard Glissant. Relation comprehends violence, marks its distance. He adds later, relation exists in being realized, that is, in being completed in a common place. A common place, as theorized by Glissant, is specific to his archipelagic formulation of the Caribbean, but it is also commonplace, as Kate Kihane reminds us, quote, without a hyphen. When used in its everyday sense, It refers to the overseen, the recognizable or banal. End quote. Walking is always an iteration of the relational. It grounds us in constant recognition and negotiation of alterity rather than stability and inwardness. It grounds us in ebbs and flows and transactions of power, which includes pedagogic power, rather than power as an unmovable, unchangeable monolith. Walking in relation is a form of glissance donné avec, or walking as giving on and with, as pedagogic embodiment of gifting towards and with, as de-hierarchizing looking and horizontal step-making. Walking in relation is as Popel crawled the Manhattan grid in his performance series Crawl, where, as his suit caught dust and dirt from the streets, he crawled at eye level, seeing the unseen, the overlooked, the twig, the shoes, the flower, the concrete, the dignity of the worker stooped to clean the streets on low wage. Next slide. So the first provocation I want to offer today is, how are you in relation with another as you walk? 2. For most of my life, I have seen slant. What began as a squint in one eye as a young child and a party trick I shared with one of my grandmothers became a full-blown third order of seeing. While learning Bharatanatyam as a child, I was asked to practice rolling my eyes as a perfect round to embody the full range of expressions that a dancer of this ilk would be able to produce. However, my squint tripped me up more than once, more often than not, literally. My feet would stop, and my squint would disrupt the perfect feminized caste order of the young Indian dancer. As the years passed, I stopped dancing, but my squint remained. I could see more than peripheries. I could see almost like an owl, but it never became a strength. What it did teach me, though, was that as and when I walked, seeing slant opened up the world. Seeing slant means that I see from below, sometimes seeing two of everything and half of something. Seeing slant became a form of walking for me. And so if we could change slides. My next offering, which is just the question on the slide for those who can't see it, is how might you see from below or see slant as you walk? In his series Walking While Black, Garnet Cardigan outlines a series of urban encounters with vulnerability. That is, he narrates them with vulnerability, but the encounters are also vulnerable. The police, as with Katib, are here again, and they initiate a series of looks. As Cardigan says, they'd glare. I'd get nervous and glance. They'd observe me steadily. I'd get uneasy. I'd observe them back, worrying that I looked suspicious. Their suspicions would increase. End quote. And so it goes, a series of looks and performances of looking that refract back until Cardigan himself is hypervisible while remaining invisible. He outlines a series of rules for himself. Quote, no running, especially at night. No sudden movements. No hoodies. No objects, especially shiny ones in hand. No waiting for friends on street corners, lest I be mistaken for a drug dealer. No standing near a corner on the cell phone, same reason. Anything less than vigilance was carelessness, end quote. And so this list also becomes a sort of pedagogic list of care. What strikes me about Cardigan's account is how much of his walking or not walking involves reading the act of looking and gazing into a form of movement that is the slant. A series of looks exchanged as quivering steps towards hostile embodiment. It feels mercurial, like the run that he forbids himself from doing. It's pedestrian, and yet it isn't. It doesn't register straight, even if the gazes received are so. Walking is seeing slant, where seeing isn't simply gazing with the eyes, but a form of whole-bodied underground sensing, sensing from the wrong way upright, sensing what is not visible, what is not meant to be seen. There are, as John Berger says, interstices between different sets of the visible. Walking, for me, as a relational practice, as a form of seeing slant, exposes us to these uneven frequencies of visibility, where we can sense and feel registers of gazes that those around us may not. But in registering them as slant, we can acknowledge their impact as belonging to the enactment of power or hegemonic order. In my case, a racial, colonized, heteropatriarchal order. And last slide, please. Thank you. My last provocation I leave with you is, how might walking become a form of radical subterfuge for you and others in relation with you? 3. Seeing askew, from below, from the undercommons, renders walking as not just a form of accessing the world, but also a way to invert it, as a form of knowledge subterfuge. Each day as I read the news, I see forms of walks that aren't acknowledged or theorized as walks, but as the body's response to dehumanization. I see Palestinian refugees walking the length of Gaza to attempt safety from genocide. I see precarious migrant domestic workers in 45-degree heat walking without transportation or water to get to their workplaces, bearing the effects of climate change long before I will. I see street vendors, city cleaners, the unhoused, users of wheelchairs and walking canes and walkers, and parents carrying their children, walking. These walks are an act of agency, born from necessity and a lurch towards life, despite their erasure as such. And they show me that walking can be a form of necessary subterfuge to survive, where subjecthood emerges from the body and resists imposition on it. When I walk with my now extreme squint in a city where I am more safe than I am welcome, and with the far right marching mere doors away from me this coming Saturday, perhaps less safe and less welcome. As Garnet Cardigan reminds us, quote, walking is after all interrupted falling. We see, we listen, we speak, and we trust that each step we take won't be our last, but will lead us into a richer understanding of the self and the world, end quote. In this climate, where walking is interrupted falling, I reach for walking as concealment, as my right to deception, to opacity, to my own form of radical subterfuge, and for those around me in relation with me. Thank you for listening.